Hello, I'm Dr. Mangia and welcome to Hidden Science. This week we'll be looking at electromagnetic frequencies and their possible effect they may have on the body. With me in the studio is James Russell, who produced and co-directed the popular documentary Resonance Beings of Frequency. We also have Ingrid Dickinson, who is an electromagnetic pollution consultant. And finally, we'll be hearing from Simon Best, who's an award-winning pioneering author on the subject. But first, let's look at a short introduction to the subject from our Hidden Science reporter, Grace Willis.
It is safe to say that the world today is nothing like the one we lived in 20 years ago. And human beings are manipulating their environment to the extent that was only dreamed of 30 years ago. Super-fast computers, touchscreen tablets, the internet, a multitude of channels in HD, and so much more. But one technology that has exploded into our consciousness far beyond all others? The mobile phone. Mobile phones have been around since the 80s, but since 2000 they have really taken off. 27% of adults and 47% of teenagers now own smartphones. The UK and the rest of the developing world have had to deal with this demand, not only for the materials used to manufacture the phones, but also in the building of vast networks of mobile phone masts to cope with the increasing requirement. The problem is no one knows what the long-term effects of mobile phone usage is, or what effects it will have on us now or in the future. Having extensively increased the electromagnetic fields in the atmosphere with Wi-Fi, mobile telephones, TV, and a soon-to-be in a home near you, the smart meter. Now being rolled out all over the country with the promise of slashing bills up to 15% by more effectively monitoring your utilities usage. The problem with the smart meter is they communicate with your suppliers using a wireless mobile phone technology. Some say that the energy they produce can be as much as 30 or 40,000 times the normal level of microwave radiation. You can choose when and in what manner to use your mobile phone. And if you follow the instructions on how to reduce RF energy, you'll be even safer. But the radiation exposed to you by your smart meter will be decided by the utility companies. So what are the long-term effects of this increased radiation? Are we harming life on our planet by this dependency upon wireless technology? Is it just sensationalism, or is it something we should all be aware of and concerned about? Back to you guys at the studio.
Wow, that's pretty alarming stuff. My first guest today, who will be discussing this more with me, is Ingrid Dickinson. Hello, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming. And I'll let you introduce yourself, because it's quite interesting what you're doing with people in your practice there.
Yes, I run the energy medicine practice, and I've been treating people with pulse magnetic fields, basically, since the last 25 years, electrocrystal therapy, but actually it's actually feeding frequencies through crystal, but it's a frequency that is important here. So I have understood since the 80s that everything is based on frequency, and if a frequency is bioactive, that means it's not biocompatible with the actual frequency of the body, it will harm the body and mainly interfere with brain frequencies. So I knew this, but just when the mobile phones came out, I understood. I also have studied Schumann resonance, the effects of Schumann resonance. And when you look at the frequencies that we are now bombarded with, they are all quite high, and Schumann resonance is 1,000th of a volt.
Right.
So there's a very, very subtle frequency that is overlaid by all these mobile phone frequencies. So people get affected, and I want to point out that when people get affected by it, and this is what I treat them for as well, electrosensitivity, I believe that everybody is electrosensitive, because what has been shown is that if you take a blood sample before and after somebody uses a mobile phone, you can get what's called the rouleau effect occurring just 15 minutes after using the mobile phone. which is the red blood corpuscles.
So this is where the blood cells actually they're clumping together. So they should be actually nice and sort of flowing.
Yeah.
And of course that could lead to problems.
Yeah, in dark field microscopy, you can actually see the effect almost immediately after using such a device.
Well, let's just talk a little bit about what sort of people you're seeing. So when people come to you, do they say, I think I'm suffering from EMFs, or what?
No, most people don't know.
Right.
Most people will say, I can't sleep.
Right.
I've got headaches. I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I've got, quite often heart rhythm disturbances, tachycardia.
Right.
Also, one person told me, in fact, she was a friend of mine, she actually had to sell her house and move.
Right.
Because she had this rummaging in her stomach, like butterflies. Every morning she woke up. It was so bad.
Well, I mean, these symptoms sound very, very similar to sort of anxiety, depression type symptoms.
Exactly.
So how are you determining that these are symptoms to do with EMFs? And how come with tachycardia and things, they're not going to see their doctor for an ECG, for example?
Well, funny enough, the doctor most probably won't notice a change. It might not be pathological, there might not be actually something wrong with the heart.
Right.
It's just that the heart is a muscle working on a pulse.
Yes.
It's like an electric pulse.
It's an electrical
so you're
system.
getting a magnetic interference. And so you now have a lot of young people having heart rhythm disturbances, a lot of young people having high blood pressure that you have never seen before. And of course, it depends on the constitution of the person, whether this ends up in more serious disease. I mean, this is not looked at. We know, I've known, because my main background is with, I've looked at research from German scientists, hence my connection to the Competence Initiative, which actually shows quite clearly that brainwave rhythms are affected, and there isn't a normal. So what is happening is that, for example, if you use your mobile phone at night, or some people makes a huge mistake of putting the mobile phone next to themselves on the bed,
Right.
Unbelievable, and that will actually interfere. So these strong pulses will interfere with brainwave rhythms. Also, what you need to understand is that the pineal gland, together with the pituitary gland, they produce melatonin at night. Melatonin mainly is produced in complete darkness. Serotonin is shut off and melatonin is produced in darkness. That's how we sleep. Melatonin is also a very important oncostatic agent, which is a cancer suppressor.
Yeah.
So and there have been studies, I have seen studies, plenty of melatonin studies. I don't know why the HPA hasn't done these melatonin studies, but they have been existing even in the 90s. That melatonin is being reduced in the presence
Would you explain what the HPA is?
Health Protection Agency, now Public Health England.
Right.
I haven't seen their melatonin studies. I don't know whether there are any. And this was mentioned in Russell's the last bit of the Resonance film. It's quite important to actually look at melatonin.
Yeah.
That is the easiest test you can do. And when melatonin is affected, this is a major free radical scavenger.
Because there's a lot of things that we don't understand about the what's known as circadian rhythm and the sort of rhythms that we have day to day, and how they're linked to sort of the frequencies of the planet, the Schumann resonance, as you say. But it's quite interesting that you say these symptoms that you commonly see. I mean, what would be a bit more conclusive that they are sort of EMF related is what happens when you take people outside of the field?
That's usually when people get better. Now, Professor Dr. von Klitzing in Germany, he's running a lab where he actually determines electrosensitivity. And he determines that with checking heart rhythm variability and microcirculation. So he can easily see how the body reacts. Quite often people are showing signs of electrosensitivity when they're previously been affected by chemical sensitivity. Now we're living in London. We have got a lot of to cope with. Then quite a lot of us are already our system is already predetermined to be polluted in some way or another.
Are there any sort of mainstream universities that are actually looking at the sort of peer-reviewed journals that are saying definitively that all these things are linked to EMF pollution?
Well, you know that even IARC, the International Association for Cancer Research, has actually, together with WHO, have actually admitted that mobile phone frequencies and all these frequencies, or wireless frequencies, are coming under 2B carcinogens. Right. So they actually have admitted it.
So it's actually WHO, but individual countries maybe not. So I believe Sweden actually recognises sensitivity, is that right?
Yes. The interesting thing is that everything seems to be determined by ICNAP. Now, ICNAP, International Standards, right? This is very interesting because you look at the background of ICNAP and you look, who is ICNAP?
Right.
ICNAP started as a little Verein in Germany.
Right.
You know, they actually have got no legal power. They're just saying...
Are they the main regulatory body for Europe?
So if you actually now go to PHE and say, I think this is dangerous, what do you think? Oh, it's within ICNAP guidelines.
Right, right.
So ICNAP is quoted all the time.
Who pays for the research for ICNAP?
That's a good question.
So they are actually creating guidelines, but those guidelines are not necessarily based on what is safe.
The guidelines are based on thermal radiation.
Thermal radiation,
right?
so
the athermal effect is the effect of the pulse within the high-frequency carrier wave.
So they're literally looking at how much the head is being cooked by the mobile phone.
Yeah, exactly.
you know what I mean.
It's never cooked. Yeah. And that's a remark that is completely taken out of context.
Yes.
And that, if that happens, then you're really in danger.
Right. Yes.
What is happening is that magnetic fields interfere with the electrical function or the brainwave frequencies.
So that aspect is being ignored, the sort of resonance aspect of what happens when you get two frequencies together, what effect it has on. Yeah, that part has been ignored.
And coming back to Schumann resonance, I would like to explain that our brain, especially the hippocampus, deeply in the limbic system, is actually vibrating at Schumann resonance.
Right.
Schumann resonance frequency. And that a hippocampus is responsible for your dreaming, for your concentration, for your creativity, and most important, for your short-term memory.
We're going for a quick break right now, so join us again in a few minutes.
So this is why we're going to see a huge increase in Alzheimer's.
Right.
Early onset Alzheimer's.
So what do you think are the long-term effects of mobile phones and all of these bombardments of the new technology on the brain, for example, or other parts of the body? What have you seen are the long-term effects in studies as well?
In studies, we're seeing that the brainwave rhythms, the whole rhythm is affected from the biological rhythm,
the circadian rhythm,
not
the
just
day-to-day rhythm. Yeah.
Because you have got lots of rhythms. Hence, I'm talking about tachycardia. There is a rhythm there, and a lot of people will tell you that they suddenly get
heart rate.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm just trying to think how that distinguishes from, if somebody's getting a high heart rate, if they're, maybe getting a sort of atrial fibrillation, for example. Is that the sort of thing that you're seeing?
Yes.
Right,
yes.
Okay.
I mean, not just, I'm saying when I'm seeing it, I'm seeing it in all the papers that I've collated since 1995.
Yeah, right.
Heart rhythm variability, that's why Dr. von Klitzing checks heart rhythm variability. That's one very good indicator whether you are reacting. But I want to stress now that electrosensitivity is only really visible or people feel it when they are kind of know their body well, when they're. But there are a lot of people who are electrosensitive. I believe that everybody, the human system is innate, is affected by electromagnetic frequencies.
Right.
We have actually evolved through Schumann resonance. Isn't it a strange coincidence that, in fact, I was told this by Dr. Wolfgang Ludwig, who used to run the Institute of Biology in Germany, that the hippocampus, I didn't know that, I found this out years ago, that the hippocampus actually is vibrating in resonance with Schumann resonance.
Right.
So now what you're having, the body doesn't hear Schumann resonance anymore. It's still there, but
Right.
it's overlaid. If you have a very subtle system and you it's like a sledgehammer technique, and you overlay it with heavy frequencies, the body can't hear it anymore.
Right, right. Well, certainly there's been various scientists over the ages, hasn't there, who've been looking at frequencies, and Nordstrom, the surgeon, who've been treating tumours with different frequencies, and there's all sorts of research. I have a book here by Harold Saxton Burr, who was doing so much work in the mid-20th century. It seems that we had various people through the ages who have been looking at the resonance side of things and how that affects our health, but it's like we're not taking it on board in the mainstream. Would you say that that was the case?
We're certainly not taking it on board in the mainstream.
Yeah. So we need to have a look at the subtle effects, what this possibly could do to our health, because we're not really taking it seriously at the moment. So, you know, from the brain tumours or the heart problems, that I presume the people that you see have already been to their doctor, and the doctor has said...
Oh, I would always say go to the doctor, or always have an EEG.
So it's
ECG.
people who've already been cleared by their doctor but still feel unwell who come to you. So what sort of things do you do? So what can someone expect if somebody comes to see you? What sort of therapy do you do?
Well, I do several things. I treat with pulse magnetic fields, so I treat with the right frequencies, with biocompatible frequencies.
And what is the technology that you use?
That would be the electrocrystal therapy.
Could you explain that a bit? Sort of.
Well, I mean, that is basically... I think Harry Oldfield could explain this better, but it's basically a frequency that is akin to a healthy human body.
Right.
You basically feed it back, and it works on harmonic resonance, so you're affecting the field. But I've also developed a meditation technique called earth breathing, where I could scan before and after, where actually you are trained to train your brain to go in harmonic resonance with Schumann resonance.
So effectively what you're doing is, if people's fundamental frequencies really are being bombarded with the wrong type of frequency from all the sort of waves that are coming into them, you're actually sort of correcting them.
Yes.
And so Professor Harry Oldfield is the inventor of this electrocrystal side of things that you do. So he's presumably worked out what the correct frequencies are to bathe people in, to bring them back to health.
Yeah, you scan before and after,
right?
So you can see how the treatment affected the body. But the exactly the same thing also happens with this technique that I've invented, this earth breathing. In harmonic resonance with Schumann resonance, again there. I also scan before and after, and the field immediately adjusts itself.
Well, certainly EEG, is it a type of EEG neurofeedback system? So you're actually bringing, I've definitely seen that happen before, where you're actually bringing the brain waves, putting people into more relaxed states, so that is that the sort of thing you're talking about?
It's a moving meditation. It's it's very much connected with intention, with imagery, with breath, and with movement.
Right.
And that will actually somehow, and this is really a mystery to me even, because I can scan before and after, and the body completely harmonizes after. However, I'm not saying that this will protect you completely from electromagnetic pollution. I think that we have to change the technology to something that is already on the agenda, but I don't understand why it's not been already pushed through, which is visible light communication.
Right, okay. And so what sort of effects are you having? I mean, what sort of results are you getting in your clinic?
Well, people, when people, more so than when people know how to adjust their frequencies themselves with the breathing,
Yes.
It quietens the brain, it quietens brain activity, and it actually makes them feel more stronger. I have very good feedback from that.
Right. But nobody's done an actual clinical trial or anything on it. No.
I'm sorry, I haven't got the money to do a clinical trials on it.
Actually, I'd be quite interested to see what you think of these smart meters that are being introduced into people's homes, sometimes even being forced into people's homes.
I think this is a travesty. I think this is terrible. We are stepping now into a time zone that will actually have a huge effect on everybody.
Well, what do you feel is the problem? What do these do?
Well, these meters are similar to mobile phone masts.
Right, in people's homes?
Inside people's homes, and they will emit pulsed frequencies.
Right.
Constantly, 24/7.
Right.
And that, as I explained before about the melatonin.
Yes.
Now, I'll have to quickly explain, because the brain thinks that, or the pineal gland receives light waves in a similar way than it receives these pulsed magnetic fields, because the pineal gland is very sensitive to electromagnetic fields, extremely sensitive. So at night, when we have complete absence of light, which that's what we should do,
yes.
Then we can make good melatonin. But if you have a smart meter in your house, 2 smart meters,
or you sleep
maybe
with
3,
your
or you
mobile
sleep with your mobile phone,
yes, yeah.
your pineal gland constantly thinks.
Right.
It's no time for
having a resonance.
It's still it thinks it's still daytime, basically. And so I've seen studies where the melatonin production has been completely disrupted, even by nearby masts, phone masts,
right.
outside the home.
Right.
So you now can think of 2 or 3, if the water meter is
right.
as well, inside the home. I don't know where we're going with this. Right. I'm really scared.
Right, that's quite frightening, yeah. I definitely have had a call myself where the energy company said you will have a smart meter, so they're forcing people to have this. And what about 4G technology as well? What do you see?
Well, there is a very sad fact about 4G. I know this myself because I see his note.
Right.
It is a priest in Germany committed suicide because of 4G.
Oh my goodness!
He couldn't take it anymore.
So very quickly, what do you suggest? Because things can get really depressing for people and think, what can I use? Can I not use on my mobile? Do you see any new technologies coming into play that are going to help with this situation?
Well, definitely, especially starting with indoor communication, like Wi-Fi, instead of Wi-Fi, Li-Fi.
Right, which is LED.
Which is visible light communication. Brilliant. Using LEDs.
I'm afraid we've got to wrap that up there. So, very positive note to end on. There are new technologies coming through. Thank you very much, Ingrid.
Okay.
When we come back from the break, we'll be speaking with James Russell, who's a producer of Resonance Beings of Frequency. See you soon. My next guest is James Russell, who is a television presenter as well as a film producer. And last year he produced the really much talked about film Resonance Beings of Frequency, which looked at mobile phones and the Schumann resonance and if there's a detrimental effect to our health in the long term from electromagnetic frequencies. So welcome to the show, James.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So, great documentary.
Thank you.
I've seen it. It's fantastic. It's your first documentary. So, what made you go for that to start off with?
Do you know what? I had no idea it was going to end up like that. It grew organically. It started out as listening to an interview with someone called Brian Steen on a radio station, and he was talking about getting sick around Wi-Fi and getting sick around mobile phones, and I thought, he's crazy. I've got to talk to him. He sounds brilliant. So I drove up and just near Nottinghamshire and went and met him. And he couldn't be any further from crazy. You know, he was the CEO of a massive frozen foods company. He was incredibly intelligent, really articulate, really well spoken. And he just said, look, I just get sick around Wi-Fi, I get sick around mobile phones. And he kind of planted the seed of, this is why I get sick. So it kind of led from that. And the more we dug, the more information we found, the further down the rabbit hole we seemed to go. And the film just literally, it almost wrote itself. It put itself together because pieces of information kept falling together. And what we did was just kind of assemble a jigsaw of trying to work out why. Because people have asked the question of, do mobile phones, does Wi-Fi, do telecommunications, does radio frequency, do microwaves, do they have a detrimental effect on our health? But nobody's really looked at how. And that was what interested us, was how, what's the mechanism, how does this work?
Yes, that's definitely interesting, because you start off by talking about the Schumann resonance. And what is the Schumann resonance, and how, if it's interfered with, that could have a detrimental effect on our health? What is that exactly? Could you explain it?
Well, I think before you look at Wi-Fi and mobile phones, and before you look at ill health that's come from that, you have to go all the way back to the beginning of the dawn of mankind. And however you believe the birth of mankind came about, we all believe a similar thing, that there was a point where man was created and we've evolved over those years. And the environment that we've evolved in, we're surrounded by frequency, we're surrounded by electromagnetic waves. In between the Earth and the ionosphere, when you put a sphere inside a sphere, you create an electromagnetic reaction, a frequency. So in between the Earth and the ionosphere and the atmosphere, there's an electrical discharge through lightning that creates a frequency. And this was discovered by Schumann nearly 70 years ago. He was a physicist. He was teaching a class one day, and he asked the question of, you know, if you put a sphere inside a sphere, does it create a frequency, and what's the frequency? And to kind of help his children understand it, help his pupils understand it, sorry. He said, well, imagine the Earth and imagine the ionosphere. So they did, and they tried to work out what the frequency of the Earth would be. And they concluded that the frequency of the Earth would be around 7.83 hertz, which is quite specific. Ironically, pretty much the same sort of time there was research taking place with the brain's frequency. Okay, the alpha waves of the human brain were being studied. And that's exactly the same frequency at 7.83 hertz.
It's almost like we've evolved to our natural habitat.
Yeah, we've tuned in. We've tuned in. It makes sense, doesn't it? We've lived on this planet for hundreds of thousands of years. If life has been on this planet for billions of years, then you tune in to your environment. That's exactly what we did.
So what you found out is, because we've got so many sort of mobile phone masts and all the sort of radiation that's surrounding us, that's our modern life, that this has started to interfere with this natural tuning in. Is that the sort of thing that you came across?
Well, yeah, there was some amazing research done by a scientist called Rutger Weaver at the Max Planck Institute for literally 30 years.
So this is a mainstream scientist.
Huge, well-respected, really, really revered scientist who for 30 years he built a bunker, and it shielded people from the electromagnetic fields of the Earth from Schumann resonance. And he took students into the bunker for 6 weeks at a time, and he analysed how they reacted to being taken away from Schumann resonance. And the effects were incredible. You know, they suffered ill health, they became nauseous, they became depressed.
This like a sort of almost like putting them in a Faraday cage?
You know, they suffered all of these ill health effects. So he built a Schumann resonator that he could broadcast 7.83 hertz. And as soon as he broadcast 7.83 hertz into the bunker, their ill health effects disappeared. They became happier, their nausea disappeared, their headaches disappeared. And
so is this what's happening now, that we're being removed from the Schumann resonance, and so some people who are maybe particularly sensitive, could you talk about electrosensitivity? Can you
I think we are all sensitive. If you look at life and what life is, the existence of life is the presence of electricity. You know, the way that they test for life, they test for electricity. The way that your brain communicates is through electromagnetic frequencies. The way that your DNA communicates inside your body is with frequencies. You are, as this film says, you are a being of frequency. Absolutely. And it's a very, very delicate construction of what we are that's taken millions of years to be created. You know, so it makes sense that something so delicate, something so fragile, something so reliant upon frequencies for cellular communication, for DNA communication, for neurotransmitters, you start all of a sudden, and it literally is, all of a sudden, when you look at the time scale that we've been on this planet and the amount of time that we've been subjected to mobile phone radiation, all of a sudden you start subjecting human beings' life to alien frequencies, bombarding them. And it's not just your mobile phone, it's you live in a soup. We all live in a soup. We have no choice. The Wi-Fi, the Apple TV.
We've all got those in our homes now.
The wireless printer, your mobile phone, your cordless deck phone, the smart meters, all of them.
Even something like a cordless DeX phone.
Well, yeah, that's exactly the same as having a mobile phone mast in your home. You know, it's the same level of radiation that you're being exposed to. It's creating this cocktail, this soup.
Right. What are the sort of long-term effects? I mean, did you look into that? Is there any reliable data, peer-reviewed journals or anything?
Well, I think what's amazing about this is when they built the mobile phone network, when they started putting towers, mobile phone towers, transmitters on buildings around London in the 1980s, they didn't do a single piece of research to look at the long-term health effects. They didn't do one piece of analysis, one piece of research to look at what the long-term health effects were. They assumed, based on the fact that it was below the radiation level of what you'd see in a microwave oven, i.e. it's not going to cook you. If it's not going to cook you, it's fine.
Because you say in the film that they're asking the wrong question about mobile phone safety.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, do you know what? If you want to, I could sit here and we could talk all day about research that's taking place, solid independent research that's taking place that shows conclusively that there is an ill health effect, that mobile phones do cause cancer, that mobile phones do reduce melatonin.
The public are quite confused because they're told one thing one minute and then,
What you get to see in the media is science that's been funded by people like the MTHR, who themselves are funded by the telecommunications industry, and the telecommunications industry aren't going to fund research that shows that they've done wrong. So they manipulate the research so it shows what they want them to show.
And so they're looking actually the wrong questions, the wrong parameters.
The people to look at are the independent researchers, the independent scientists in universities. And when you look at the independent research, the vast majority of it shows that there is an effect. Ironically, when you look at the research that's funded by industry, the vast majority of that shows that there isn't an effect. But unfortunately, the research that's funded by industry, that's the stuff that's written beautifully so it can then be shown in the Daily Mail, in the Independent, in the Times. The stuff that's written by universities, these are scientists. They're not there to change the world, they're there to conduct an experiment and write about it. So you read it, and it's like reading the instructions for a VHS video recorder in the 1980s. It's just absolute madness. So you can't, it's illegible, you can't understand it. You know, so you don't end up reading about it.
So
I think with that, before you look at all of the research, the simplest thing to look at, if you want to know if mobile phones are dangerous, if there is a health effect, take out your safety guide, go all the way to the back, get a magnifying glass. I can't remember
seeing a safety guide for a mobile phone.
You'll need a magnifying glass because it's at the back of probably the least read document in the world, which is the safety instructions from who on earth reads that. Go all the way back, take out a magnifying glass and read under SAR. And read what the mobile phone manufacturers are instructing you to do, how far to keep it away from your body at all times. Now that isn't there to keep...
How far is it? What do they tell you?
In some cases up to an inch.
Oh my goodness!
Try talking on your mobile phone an inch away from your ear. It's impossible.
So what should people do? I mean, should we just... Also, we've heard a lot of this about electricity pylons and things like that. Is this just the same sort of thing recycled? I mean, people get confused and...
Do you know, there's loads of research about alternating current, electromagnetic radiation and childhood leukemia, for example, and people living under power lines, and I think that research now is so solid that it's not even discussed.
So again, this is sort of, it's interrupting the human frequency. So what should people do? I mean, how should people change their lifestyle, do you think? Having done all this research for the movie and spoken to so many scientists and experts, like, what's your advice for people?
Do you know what? I think that's the most difficult thing, is that wireless technology makes our life so easy. The mobile phone makes your life so great. You know, having Wi-Fi at home, it makes your life great. Having a DeX phone, having a wireless printer, having Apple TV, it's brilliant. It makes your life so easy. Because the first thing you need for people to make a change is people's will. And people love their technology.
What if they need it for work? I mean, what if they constantly have to be on the phone for work?
My perception of it is it's like smoking. In 1964, the Surgeon General's report came out and it showed that smoking caused cancer.
Right.
You know, 30 years later, they finally put a warning on a cigarette packet, but people still smoke, and people know the danger of smoking, but they still smoke. I think if people are going to use technology, they need to understand the dangers, and then they make their decision based on the dangers. The problem is, we're entering a point now where people have no choice about being exposed. We have exposed the entire planet to this cocktail of radiation without truly fully understanding the effects. Because like any carcinogen, you don't smoke one cigarette and get cancer.
So do you think
it takes a period of time, doesn't it?
Yes.
It takes, you know, with smoking, you're talking 15 to 20 years, you know. And when you look at when the mobile phone really became popular, was kind of like the mid-90s.
Yes.
So we're approaching now that 20-year period. And what do you know, all of a sudden we're seeing epidemiology research by people like Hardell that have shown that if you use a mobile phone, you increase the risk of certain brain tumours.
Yeah,
What
and it's
brain
certain
tumours?
brain tumours,
You increase the risk of brain tumours associated with mobile phones because it's close to the ear.
So do you think that in the future mobile phones are going to come with a warning, like your cigarettes?
They should do.
They
do come with a warning, but they hide the warning.
They hide the warning.
They
like
tell
a
you,
very, very big warning.
The
like
warning
on
isn't for you.
Yeah.
The warning is not for you.
It's
the
just
warning,
to cover themselves legally.
The warning is when they stand up in court, they can say right there in the safety manual, we told you how to use this phone.
I see.
You ignored it.
So what do you think is the answer? I mean, do we have to develop new technology that's not so toxic to us?
I think that the technology that we have today is so ingrained in our lives that it's difficult to develop new technology.
Maybe we should just all learn how to be telepathic.
That'd be awesome. I think we just need to be knowledgeable about it, and I think we need to be cautious with it. You know, if you have Wi-Fi, turn it off. If you have a mobile phone, use a headset. So maybe plug your...
Just limit your exposure.
Do your best to limit your exposure, I think is key.
Right, brilliant. Well, thank you very much for appearing on our show.
You're welcome.
Right, we're going for a break now, so join us in a few minutes. Hello and welcome back. On the show now we've got Simon Best, who is currently the editor of Caduceus magazine. But 25 years ago, he was one of the pioneering researchers on electromagnetic frequencies. And he actually co-wrote a book called Electromagnetic Man. And he's joining us by Skype now. Hello, Simon. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Manjit.
Hello. So you wrote this book, co-authored it with Cyril Smith. It came out in 1989. A lot has really changed since then. Could you tell us what you've seen in the whole arena of electromagnetic pollution in that sort of 25 years?
Well, it's expanded dramatically. Our book covered up really to sort of involve power lines and substations and VDUs, microwave ovens. But after it came out in the following decade, that's when mobile phones emerged and masts and all the controversy over their microwave transmissions and irradiation. And then subsequent to that, Wi-Fi in schools, and most recently, of course, smart meters and all that technology.
So we understand that there's been a lot of controversy in, I believe it's Canada, about Wi-Fi in schools. What's been happening there?
Well, in Ontario, just recently, the Ontario Teachers Association voted basically to remove Wi-Fi from classrooms throughout Ontario, which is a fairly significant move, both in terms of health protection of the children, but also a potential legal liability in the future. Unfortunately, in this country, I think the teachers are yet to be fully aware of the importance of the problem and the health effects that they're exposing themselves to, but most particularly the children to.
Right. And have they actually been seeing health effects that they can specifically pin down to EMFs in children?
Well, there's a new study by some Greek researchers that just came out recently. It's actually on the PowerWatch website if you want to see the details.
The PowerWatch website, right?
Yes, run by Alistair Phillips, who will in fact be writing about it in the next issue of Caduceus.
Right.
But they exposed fruit flies to varying levels of radiation from a variety of sources, including Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, DECT, mobiles, and found some dramatic effects even in the short period that they exposed them, which was 5 minutes to 60 minutes over 3 to 5 days,
right,
in the fertility of the flies. Flies are flies, but given the short term in which they expose them and the dramatic reductions up to about 30% in some cases, it gives real cause for concern when it comes to exposing children chronically all day long in a classroom, never mind Wi-Fi at home, of course, as far as smart meters go.
Well, we definitely have been seeing, of course, fertility drop in many sort of European countries, so maybe that's an area of investigation in the future. You know, if it can happen to fruit flies, it may be happening to us.
Well, and when it comes to children in schools, not just obviously the health effects, but the long-term effects on their reproduction. Schools themselves in 5 to 10 years could be faced with mega litigation from parents and mega class actions that will frankly put them out of business. And this is from primary schools right through to most expensive public schools.
Wow, that's definitely something that that people in this country, in the UK, are not so aware of. But there's another issue that's really pressing, I think, on people's minds at the moment, and that's the issue of smart meters, which you referred to earlier. That's something that seems to be sort of being brought into our homes, whether we like it or not. But there's many people who've got some concerns about whether this is a good idea.
Yes, and again, it's more developed, advanced perhaps in North America, but interestingly, the American Association of Environmental Medicine, again, just very recently, has called for a moratorium on the rollout of smart meters because of the whole question of irradiating, you know, an entire family all day long, 24/7. Pregnant women, infants, the elderly, the infirm. This technology has never been tested on.
Right.
And if it was a new drug, it would never get out of the laboratory. But the power companies and others, and vested interests, politicians included, seem to think that they can just expose us to it without us having any say on the matter, never mind the whole question of human rights.
So
there are various other dimensions to it of a more sinister nature that people might want to be extremely concerned about.
So what are the sort of more sinister reasons, do you think, that might be possibly going on?
Well, besides the fact that people can hack into the system, burglars could hack in and obviously see when you're in and out in terms of planning robberies. Some have brought up the fact that, in fact, they can image, using the Wi-Fi, can be used to image the people in the house and monitor their movements, monitor how many and who is in there, what they're doing, for whatever reasons.
So it's not just monitoring what gadgets and electronic devices you're using?
No. The potential is there for a far more Big Brother intrusion.
Right.
I mean, this is Big Brother writ large. I mean, right there in your home, able to, by a sort of equivalent of thermal imaging, see who's in, what they're doing, you know, in the kitchen, sleeping, watching TV. Security people would argue that it allows them to monitor those who need to be monitored, and if necessary, perhaps even kill them
Gosh.
worst case scenario if you're talking terrorists.
So this,
but for the rest of us, the entire country, every single house, you are going to be exposed to this blanket radiation.
So there's the blanket radiation, which we don't know is safe at all because it's never been tested, as well as this thermal imaging. So not only will we be able to tell what you're switching on, but actually what you're doing on your movements around the house. Gosh, that is
Indeed.
very, very worrying, and it seems to be becoming compulsory as well, which is...
Well, that's where the whole issue is debated, whether it should be mandatory, whether there should be alternatives, as this American environmental medicine report is saying, that perhaps the analog versions should be still offered and allowed. And there will be arguments around that.
Yeah.
But there's, potential legal action I've heard in the States going forward. So if they win any precedent cases, you can be sure that they'll start similar ones over here.
Right. Gosh. Yes, there's lots of cause for concern there. With you yourself being such a pioneer in looking at these topics, years ago when you did write this book with Cyril Smith, you did highlight that electromagnetic fields of any sort actually have an effect perhaps on cell membranes. So, if we can look at the actual mechanisms by which EMFs could cause the damage that they do, could you talk a bit more about the effects that they have actually on living cells?
Well, research basically by people like Professor Ross Adey, Dr. Carl Blackman, Dr. Abe Liboff and others basically showed that they could affect the cell membrane permeability, which then of course changes what nutrients and other biochemicals enter and leave the cell. And they were particularly showed an effect on calcium efflux from cells.
Right. So permeability is how much water can come in and out of cells, which is very important for the cell's functioning.
Yes, there's that. Exactly, permeability of that membrane is critical to what can pass in and out.
And of course, calcium influx is so critical for muscles and all sorts of functioning that happen in cells.
It would help explain memory loss and anxiety and sleeping problems and other effects, cognitive functioning or malfunctioning.
Yes.
You don't want calcium efflux from the brain, most certainly.
Exactly. So it's interesting.
You don't want effects on the blood-brain barrier either, which again is shown to be affected.
Absolutely.
So,
it seems that we've got research that goes back a long time. The work of people like Robert Becker and Harold Saxton Burr, who've been saying for a long time that, fields actually do affect cells. And there's even some mainstream research that I've been looking at from the University of Aberdeen that actually says that stronger fields actually, from a team this is a new scientist, stronger fields actually encourage cells to divide. So you really were pioneering, which of course, the stronger the fields, the possibility is that the stronger the field, the more division of cells, and more division of cells, it may be leading to the cancer effects that we're actually seeing.
That would indeed, be a potential consequence.
Yeah.
Increase the rate of division and potential cancer effects. There's been a new study just by Dr. Hardell just a couple of months ago from Sweden, who's a major pioneer over the last 10 years, looking at mobile phone effects, and he's reporting increased acoustic neuromas and gliomas in the site of the face, etc.
What do you think will happen with 4G? Well, is that more dangerous?
I think potentially it certainly could be. You've got, it's also the chronic irradiation. The body generally can recover from assaults, various environmental assaults, if given time to recover and regenerate. But where you're getting not only the immune system being chronically affected and debased, but in a home situation, if you're going to have Wi-Fi in your home, which I strongly advise against, and go back to a wired system for your computer systems, you're getting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week while you're sleeping,
Right.
irradiation. And
Okay.
the body and the brain just
are there any last comments you'd like to make for what people could do? Maybe not use Wi-Fi?
Well, certainly not use Wi-Fi in the home.
Right.
Not just for yourself, but for your children or pregnant wife or...
And resist smart meters.
Resist
resist having
most
smart
certainly.
meters.
And particularly, though, for the children, again, in the schools, really educate your teachers.
Yes.
And
bring that in. Okay.
Make sure that they, vote
Thank you
against
very much. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's been most enlightening, and you've been doing so much work in this arena for so long. So thank you for all the work that you've been doing and for joining us today. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay.
Well, that's all we've got time for today, but thank you so much for joining us on Hidden Science. And make sure you join us next time as well, because we've been talking about lucid dreaming. So thank you and goodbye for now.